For me? That's perfect. Thank you. Hello, everybody. So welcome to Organizing Your Journey and Not Losing Your Cool. We have a little theme with today's presentation. Anybody guess what it is?
To infinity and beyond.
Yes, we're going Toy Story today, because I do not like to sit in boring presentations, right? So got to kick it up a notch, have a little fun with Buzz Lightyear and Woody. So I'm a big fan of those movies, as I hope you are too. So my name is Paula Burns. I am one of the family resource specialists with the Early Steps program. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about what that job entails. I cover 4 counties in the state of Florida: Pinellas, Pasco, Hernando, and Citrus County. And footnote, right after this presentation in the Plaza Ballroom, I have another presentation with a lot of ideas for recycled items that you can use, not just for infants and toddlers, but beyond, and a lot of good links and resources. So I hope you'll join me for that one. So our objectives for today, first of all, we're going to make sure that we learn to better communicate. And even though I'm up here being the speaker today, I will tell you that I was not perfect. I have not been perfect. I've certainly not communicated perhaps in the most diplomatic ways with my time. So I'll share some of that, and then also to start an organization process for yourself. And for each person in this room, that's going to look a little bit different, okay? So
Buzz Lightyear to Star Command. Come in, Star Command.
you remember this clip, right?
Star
Where
Command,
Buzz
Do you read
Lightyear
me?
lands in Andy's room and talks about his ship being crash landed by mistake. So many of you, because the Family Cafe is all about disabilities, and usually caregivers or parents and loved ones of those with disabilities, hopefully you have before now heard about Welcome to Holland. Raise of hands if you've heard Welcome to Holland. I have some that haven't, so this makes me happy because I always like to, I always like to share this with families that have children that are first entering our Early Steps program. And most recently found a whole bunch of YouTube videos where there's been students that have done projects that have put this famous program into images and words. So I'm gonna play it for you here.
Welcome to Holland, a poem by Emily Kingsley, narrated by Alicia Rosen. I am often asked to describe the experience of raising a child with a disability, to try to help people who have not shared that unique experience to understand it. To imagine how it would feel, it's like this. When you're going to have a baby, it's like planning a fabulous trip to Italy. You buy a bunch of guidebooks, and you make your wonderful plans. The Colosseum, the Michelangelo's David, the gondolas in Venice. You may even learn some handy phrases in Italian. It's all very exciting. After months of eager anticipation, the day finally arrives. You pack your bags and off you go. Several hours later, the plane lands. The stewardess comes in and says, "Welcome to Holland." Holland, you say? What do you mean, Holland? I signed up for Italy. I'm supposed to be in Italy. All my life I've dreamed of going to Italy. But there's been a change in the flight plan. They've landed in Holland, and there you must stay. The important thing is that they haven't taken you to some horrible, disgusting, filthy place full of pestilence, famine, and disease. It's just a different place. So you must go out and buy a new guidebook, and you must learn a whole new language, and you will meet a whole new group of people you would have never met. It's just a different place. It's slower paced than Italy, less flashy than Italy, but after you've been there for a while and you've catched your breath, you look around and you begin to notice that Holland has windmills. Holland has tulips. Holland even has Rembrandts. But everyone you know is busy coming and going from Italy, and they're all bragging about what a wonderful time they've had there. And for the rest of your life, you will say, yes, that's where I was supposed to go. That's what I had planned. The pain of that loss will never, ever go away, because the loss of that dream is a very significant loss. But if you spend your life mourning the fact that you didn't get to go to Italy, you may never be free to enjoy the very special, the very lovely things about Holland.
Phew, right? That still chokes me up every time I read that poem, every time I watch this video, and as I'm sure it does for many of you. And you know what? It's okay. Emotions are okay. So...
Sheriff, this is no time to panic.
This is the perfect time to panic. I'm lost. Andy is gone. They're going to move from their house in 2 days, and it's all your fault.
Mike!
I panicked. Did you panic? I panicked. So I want to tell you a little bit about my story, my personal experience. And if you don't know, every family resource specialist in the Early Steps program has a story. The main job role, one of the requirements of our job, is to be the parent or a caregiver of someone that was eligible for services or would have been eligible for services. So this is Jeremy, and he was actually 1 day old in this picture. As you can see, he had a really big head. And I'm going to share a little bit of video. So Jeremy was born at 39 weeks. This is him just a few minutes after he was born. His APGAR scores were a 7 and a 9. He was born in Clearwater at a hospital, and when he was about 3 hours old, he was transported to All Children's Hospital in St. Pete. He spent 2 months in the NICU when he was born. And then he was in Early Steps, and at the age of 3, they said, okay, now he's going to school. And I freaked out again. This is him actually on his first day of school.
You dancing? Show mommy how to dance.
And well, he was dancing before he got in the car, but then when you see him in the car, he looks like he was kind of scared to death. And actually, I think I was more scared than he was at that time. So he actually didn't walk till he was 27 months old. And that's in pre-K there. And he actually didn't talk or eat solid foods till he was about 4 and a half. He made every therapist work for their money.
Good job.
Yes.
Good job.
Do it again. More. Mommy wants more.
There you go. Good job.
And this is Jeremy now.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm an adult, and I love Ladybug, a TV show.
And I got to smile because, you know, he's a teenager, right? He's 19. So when he was born, they discovered he had a brain bleed. You can see on the left side, the left screen, there's bright white areas. That's actually the bleed itself. And then the big black areas where the fluid was built up. So his platelet count was 7,000 when he was born. Typical newborn, it's usually 100,000. So that's why they rushed him to All Children's. He had blood and platelet transfusions en route. And I'll never forget, at the hospital where he was born, the first doctor that came in from the NICU, came in and said, we're running some tests, we're going to transport him, and asked us if we wanted to call our pastor. And for some people, calling a pastor might have been like calling a best friend, but for me, that meant something different. So I'll just say, if you're in the audience and you are a professional working in the medical field, parents, do not forget the words you say. So use them mindfully, because I love nothing better going back to the hospital now and running into that NICU doctor who still works there. And we always make a point of taking a picture with Jeremy, because I like to show her how far he has come. So, the brain can repair itself, as you can see from these pictures. He has a shunt that is internal, that drains the fluid. He has several labels, if you will. But as many of you know, labels do not define what our kids are capable of doing, nor what they are going to be capable of doing. So hydrocephalus is the fluid, the water on the brain. As a result of that bleed, he has right hemiplegia, cerebral palsy, and epilepsy actually developed about 9 years old. And of course, the anxiety, the sensory processing, all those things come along. So actually, this coming Monday, he's going to have his 9th surgery. So he's had a total of 4 brain surgeries, 2 eye surgeries, and this will be his 3rd foot surgery. So, and Jeremy likes to do things on his own terms. So last year, in the middle of the pandemic, he had his first ever shunt malfunction, where they actually realized that a part of his tube had snapped. So we found ourselves in the ER in the middle of the COVID pandemic, which was quite scary, quite crazy. And footnote on the sensory part, he was actually more afraid of that thing going up his nose for the COVID test than he was about the brain surgery, okay? So it's crazy. So you may have seen Jeremy at the Family Cafe. We've actually been attending this conference since 2008, and most recently in 2019, if you remember seeing the teddy bear, if you were here that year, we have a nonprofit called Hugs of Florida. It's a local support group, and Jeremy was the one that came up with the idea to overcome some of his sensory processing. He wanted us to buy a mascot costume, and he wanted to dress up in it. So, the first time we got it, he would put the head on for like literally 10 seconds. Okay, I'm done, and take it back off, and got used to it. And the last time the Family Cafe was, which was, 2 years ago, he would stand in that costume for, 30, 40 minutes at a time, entertaining the kids. And then just one more footnote to the personal piece. So I don't know if any of you were here in 2015, but I had just become a licensed Zumba instructor. It's a little part-time job for me. And I showed up to take the Zumba class. It was actually at Carib Royale that year. And the instructor that was supposed to be there didn't show up. So ever since then, I've been doing the Zumba class. So if you danced with me back in 2019, don't worry, we'll be back next year in person dancing. But and just, if you don't think you can dance or do Zumba because you've heard Zumba's crazy wild, no. We do adaptive Zumba. Even if you can't stand, if you sit in a wheelchair, I have a version of Zumba for you. So hopefully we can dance again next year. So we're going to talk about communication today, and sharing ideas, information, thoughts, feelings, opinions. We communicate a lot with different people on a day-to-day basis, sometimes verbally, sometimes in writing, and sometimes that nonverbal communication. So body language, tone of voice, all those things come into play when we're dealing with other people. And then when we're dealing with other people and it involves our kids, that becomes a whole nother level. So in Early Steps, we have this training that we developed that starts to put the building blocks for families to learn how to do those communication skills a little bit better, a little bit more clearly, with not only the people in the early intervention system, but also beyond. So even if you don't have a child that's birth to 3, or you're not working with that group of individuals right now, hopefully you'll get something out of this workshop. So now we're gonna do a little exercise, and not Zumba, don't worry. I'm not gonna throw that at you. But if you have a piece of paper, if you don't raise your hand, I've got a pad of paper here, and my husband John will give you a piece of paper. Yeah, we got a couple out here. Just give them a piece of paper. We're gonna do a little exercise just to see how well we communicate, right? So I'll give him a second just to hand that out, and hopefully you got something to write with. And I used to always love coming to the Hyatt for my workshops because they would always have these great pens, right? But probably because of COVID, they can't hand them out now. But hopefully you went in the exhibit hall and got a piece of paper and a pen. And if not, you can just imagine. That's okay too. Or if you got a phone, a little drawing app on your phone, you can always pull that out and do that, right? And then when everybody's got a piece of paper, we'll move forward. Do a little activity, and the reason for this activity, the purpose, is to emphasize the importance of effective communication. All right, almost everybody has one. So you guys are gonna draw a picture. Now don't worry if you're not an artist, I'm not gonna grade you, right? But you're gonna draw a picture on any piece of paper. It can be a small little business card, whatever. I'm going to give you instructions. You can't ask any questions, okay? So you're going to just go by the instructions that I give you and not ask questions, and hopefully not look over and cheat from your neighbor, all those things. And let's start. You have to do this too. I'm going to make him do it. Right? You haven't done this. Okay. Ready? All right, first instruction, number 1. On the top of the top right side of the page, draw a triangle. On the top right side of the page, draw a triangle. I'll go ahead and I'll read them each twice just so that you get it fully, right? All right, number 2. To the left of the triangle, draw 2 horizontal lines. To the left of the triangle, draw 2 horizontal lines. Number 3, connect the 2 lines. Connect the 2 lines. Number 4, under the lines, draw a large square. Under the lines, draw a large square. Gosh, you guys are such good students. You're concentrating, and I love it. All right. See, I already lost my place. See, that's what happens when I get off track. Squirrel! No. Number 5. This is me. This is why I made notes. Number 5, above the lines, draw a small square. Above the lines, draw a small square. Number 6, to the right of the square, draw a rectangle. To the right of the square, draw a rectangle. All right, now what you're going to do is put your pen down and you're going to hold up your picture and you're going to show it to everybody else. Let me see what we've got out here. Oh. Did you see my presentation? No. Right, okay. So maybe I went a little too fast for some of you, right? Maybe I went a little fast, maybe I was going a little too slow, like you're sitting here like squirrel, like, yeah. So this is what your picture should have looked like. It's a house, right? So I'll just, so let me just read through the instructions again. So the top right side of the page, draw a triangle. So that was the little triangle, right? And then you drew the two horizontal lines. You connected the two lines, so that made the whole roof. And then under the lines, you drew the large square. That's the front part of the house. And then above the lines, the small square, that's the chimney, right? So it was very random with the instructions. But the reason for doing this exercise is because you all heard the same instructions, but everybody's picture was different, right? So we all hear things differently. And effective communication, everybody has different interpretations of that. You know, some of the barriers could have been multiple meanings. When I said above, was it right above? Was it connected? You know, all those different things. And perhaps, well, I can tell you, my husband, even though he did see my presentation, says probably why his looks more like a house than everybody else's. But he's also a building inspector, so that's probably why his looked like a house, right? So, you know, he's electrical inspector with buildings, so he deals with houses every day. So there's a lot of different reasons, and, you know, our past experiences, cultural differences, all those things. So we also have internal biases when we're doing things. So sometimes our feelings and emotions come into all of that. And then, how many of you just kept drawing faster and faster, going, come on, hurry up, she's going too slow, right? So some of that might have been jumping to conclusions about what you thought I was going to say next. So, and who slept good? Does anybody sleep good in a hotel room? No, right? You want your own pillow. I wish I'd have brought mine. But there's a lot of different reasons for not having effective communication. So that little exercise, that's always kind of fun to see, you know, the outcomes, just signifies that, you know, the differences that we all have. So, and when it comes to children, you know, that might be developmentally delayed, might have some sort of an established condition, you know, need services, you know, we have a lot of those emotional things that come into play with dealing with the child's diagnoses. When we see the Welcome to Holland poem and, you know, we hear those words and we start internalizing the things that we've been through and, you know, just trying to work through some of those issues and some of those challenges. It's a lifelong thing. Jeremy is 19, he's gonna be 20 in July, and you know, I'm still learning how to effectively communicate and help him now to advocate for himself, right, with the system. So I think one of the main big things and things to remember is when you are dealing with other people with system services, ask questions. Don't think that by asking questions, you know, you're going to be judged. You shouldn't be judged. Everybody should, you know, answer your questions, giving you the information that you need. And, you know, I always say we don't know what we don't know, right? So many times, you know, when you go into a program like Early Steps or the school district, nobody comes out with this full menu of all these things that you're going to get or your child could possibly receive. I learned what my son would benefit from other parents. You know, I learned from seeing other children coming to the family cafe and sitting in sessions like this. You know, I met other parents, and just last night or Thursday night, we were sitting out by the pool and was talking to another parent and learned something new. Like, you always learn. You can always keep learning. And when it comes to those emotional issues, you know, sometimes, you know, professionals don't always have that understanding if they have not walked in your shoes. So sometimes connecting with other parents, actually not sometimes, all the time, connecting with other parents that have walked in those shoes and might be a few steps ahead of you. And that's why the Early Steps program, that's why we have family resource specialists in our program, is to be that parent connection. So if you are in Early Steps, you know, everybody has a service coordinator, everybody has someone that's coordinating their services, but there's a family resource specialist available to you, as there is, you know, in the school district with fiddlers. There's someone there that's representing families and speaking on behalf of families. So make sure you connect with that person, because usually they're the person that knows the most about what's happening because they've walked in your shoes and they've had to get their answers. So I know that this presentation is being recorded, and then also my information is in the program and in the app. So if you do want a copy of the PowerPoint, you can shoot me an email right now. There are a couple of handout things that I'm going to mention that I can also attach to the email too. So going back to that Toy Story, because I think I mentioned in the beginning, about the not always being perfect myself. So one of the famous lines from Toy Story where Buzz says, excuse me, but I think the word you're searching for is Space Ranger, and Woody says, the word I'm searching for I can't say because there's preschool toys present, right? So, yes, how many times you're laughing because you've said those words under your breath maybe, but you've said those words, right? So just a reminder that your child is following your example, right? So my son has no filter, and he still, to this day, will repeat things that I said in IEP meetings, and sometimes he just repeats those things, to the professionals that, well, let me give you a great example. This will make you laugh. So he was in elementary school, and he was doing PE. And you remember I said he has a shunt, right? He has hydrocephalus and cerebral palsy. So he walks. He does use the wheelchair because he tires out, but he does walk and can move around. And at that point in elementary school, he was doing PE. And so they were doing volleyball, and it came time to rotate the rows, right? And they tried to get him to move up to the front row, and he wouldn't. And the teacher came up and was trying to coax him up there, and she said, why aren't you moving up? And he said, it is illegal for me to be in the front row. It says so on my IEP. And he was literally 7 years old, right? And so that was his interpretation of hearing me say that his IEP was a legal document, right? And it did say that Jeremy should avoid any contact sports because of the shunt, right? So, yeah, they hear everything you say, whether they say it right or not when it comes back out. So, but he got his point across, that PE teacher, and shortly after that, we kind of realized that PE was, because we were doing physical therapy and everything, the PE, going outside in the heat with the cerebral palsy and all that, it was more traumatic and more tiring for him to use up all his energy doing those things. So we adapted to where he didn't actually do PE for a long time after that in school, because it was counterproductive to the rest of the school day. So individual, right? That individual family support plan in early steps, or the individual IEP, the individual education plans. So remember that individual part, that's important. So when we're communicating with others, we want to make sure that we feel confident with their communication. I can tell you Jeremy was pretty confident when he put his hand up and said it was, against the law for him to, do that in his PE class. So, and then also, expressing your ideas, your feelings, beliefs. Again, I know I've not been perfect. When Jeremy was young, when he first started started the preschool program, he got bit by another student. And oh man, I read back those emails a few years ago, and I was like, what was I saying? Sometimes that we have to take a deep breath, right, before we, it's always good to write the things out, maybe, and get that out, but then maybe read them before you hit send, especially in the electronic world, because once you send it, it's hard to, it doesn't come back so quick. So making sure that you can, if you are in person, which is happening more and more, thank goodness now, than on Zoom anymore, but, try to make sure that you maintain that eye contact, if you can, respect by listening. They always say we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, right? So sometimes I have to remember to take a pause and listen. And, sometimes responding back, repeating back what somebody has said, just to make sure you understand and they understand, what you thought you heard. And the bottom line is, and you've probably heard this more than once at this conference, you're the expert when it comes to your child. Now, that doesn't mean you know everything about child development and education and medical. No, that's not what that means, but that means you know your child and you know how your child's going to adapt to this world and the services and the things they need. So your voice needs to be heard, and that's important, and important for you to be able to communicate across to other people. So don't forget, we always seem to talk about the challenges and all the things, especially when it comes to services and getting services, whether it's in early steps or the school district or beyond. We're always talking about the deficits and the things that our children or young adults can't do. And don't forget to focus on those strengths. Focus on the good things. Talk about the good things that they can do. There is a organization called the Florida Transition Project that put together these little fishy books. And this is one of the things I can send to you electronically if you send me an email. And it just has, if a child's transitioning into a new classroom, to give the teacher some ideas of the things that they like, the things they don't like, just a little about me kind of thing. And, I know my son connected a lot better with people that understood. When you walk in that doctor's office and, the doctor asks him about Star Wars, his eyes light up like, hey, you know about Star Wars? Wait, you're a doctor, So sometimes for professionals that are working with your children, being able to communicate the things that they like, the things that are important to them, is going to make that connection. And, when you're positive and in a good mind with communicating with other people, your children will see that. So definitely encourage that. So you're flying, but Woody says, nope, that wasn't flying, that was falling with style. So again, I told you I'm not perfect. Start to think about, I know for me, I've shared a couple of things already where, when you have dealt with a situation that's been, like I mentioned, when he got bit in pre-K, right? I wrote emails to everybody I could, the ESC director, the principal, all these people, when in fact they had no clue about my son and all those things. I wanted to be heard, right? So when I look back and I think about that, it probably would have been better if I would have communicated that first with his classroom teacher, which eventually I did after it came back down, right? But instead of going up, I went down the ladder. And, when I look back at those things, sometimes that's not always the best way. So, writing out those frustrations on paper sometimes, and then problem solving, whether it's with a friend, a spouse, someone, a coworker, just to talk out those ideas and just see if you were, asking them questions, what their response would be and how they would feel. And revenge, yes, that's never a good thing, right? They don't like to promote it in Toy Story, and I don't recommend it either. So I like to believe in karma, right? So all those things, I mentioned the doctor in the NICU. Even though I was mad, that doctor had mentioned those things way back when, I tried to turn it around in my mind to be a teachable moment, to hope that now that doctor knows Jeremy's outcomes, and I keep, every time I see her, taking a picture with him, right? So she can keep remembering him and remembering how far he's come. I hope that even if it doesn't change that for Jeremy and for my personal experience, it'll change it for the next family, and if we keep all doing that and paying those moments forward, if you will, then I think, we'll continue to have a better place. So I did actually pick up when I was in the exhibitor hall. I think it was the Florida Inclusion Network or Fiddlers actually had a great communication handout that's there. But I do also have one that, again, if you send off an email, I'll send you the PowerPoint and some handouts. I tried to not bring copies to hand out, just with the whole COVID precautions. We were trying to keep everything electronically as much as we could. But when it comes to whether it's telephone, writing, or in-person meeting, think of it as assertive communication, okay? So not aggressive. Sometimes you feel like you want to make it that way, but assertive just means, you know what, I'm strong, I'm going to get my point across positively, bring up some good points, talk about some of those things, but then, also make sure there's some sort of outcome that comes out of that. So. And stay on target, that's another, definite recommendation. Squirrel, right? So I've already gone off track a few times, and, it's hard especially when you're dealing with something with your child to not, you've already heard me bring up so many examples of things as I'm presenting, it's hard to not remember those things when you're dealing with the next person that's doing something with your child, and to bring up all those past experiences, because it just does usually make a better experience going forward. But staying positive, and one of the ways to do that in targeting the important issues is, you've probably heard of a plan of action before. So plan of actions, it doesn't have to be anything formal or fancy, but first, come up with what is the concern, what is the challenge, what are we dealing with, what's that priority. Go in there with what you want that outcome to be, whether it's a meeting or you're writing an email or making a phone call. And then, try to figure out in your mind, what's reasonable with the timeline and with the outcome, and what will you settle for versus, what might be offered. And then, there's always phone a friend, right? You can always talk to somebody else, ask for someone else to, come in the loop and assist with problem solving. And sometimes just, sharing, like I'm sharing with you, sharing some of those experiences and ideas with other people can definitely help. I encourage you, if you're not already involved with the family care councils, the ESC advisory committees. Every school district has an ESC advisory committee. Every one of them has parent involvement opportunities. The days of PTA, like I rolled my eyes when they first tried to approach me in elementary school with PTA, don't you see what I'm dealing with? I have a son with special needs, I've got all these things. But what I realized was PTA really didn't have a good representation for disabilities, right? They were, the stay-at-home moms that bake cookies all day, or at least that's the image in our minds when we think of PTA. So I did get involved. In fact, for 2 years, I was PTA president in the elementary school, because I felt like there weren't enough opportunities for, the kids that had disabilities, and that awareness of it. And many times I went in, every time they did a teach-in, and I told Jeremy's story, and he helped me present, his story, and we talked about those things and made those other children aware, of what he goes through and what he has to deal with. And it creates empathy. That's a good thing, So we do have our little community. We're not little, we're growing. This Family Cafe is amazing every year. We do have our community of people, right? But if we reach outside of that community, more and more the world will end up being better for all of us, and for our kids and young adults with disabilities. So we stick together, right? So I encourage you, if you didn't download the app, The app is an amazing thing. I'm a little bit of a nerd, but when it comes to technology and computers, but the app is just so usable. It's got everybody's contact information. I encourage you to connect with other people. You know, every year I come to the Family Cafe and, you know, I meet someone new and I speak to someone new, whether it's a speaker or a parent, and, you know, I reach out to them. We find each other on Facebook. We stay connected, and you learn so many things from other people's experiences. So I definitely encourage you to network, not just with professionals, but with other parents. Family resource specialists in early steps, you know, parent advocates, the Family Care Council, the Family Cafe. I don't know, you know, if you know, I mean, they are all parents. They all started from being a parent and grew this into what it is today. So parents make things happen, right? So now let's talk a little bit about organization. So record keeping. I know I talked to somebody earlier before we started about record keeping, and she said she only had 1 3-inch binder or something, and I said, oh my gosh, I think I got like 10 for my son, right? So depending on the amount of education needs or medical needs, and if you're one of those parents that always ask for a copy of everything, you know, the paperwork builds up, and there's lots of different ways to organize that paperwork. I used to just, well, I think at one point I actually was organizing it with the little, you know, in tabs and, you know, all the IEPs in one place, all the evaluations in one place. And then I got to the point where it was difficult to cross-reference and go over those things. So think about, you know, where you get your information and where you store it. Nowadays, like so many things are done electronically. I, you know, started to realize when they were doing like the IEPs and those things electronic, and started to ask the question of, well, do you have to print that out for me, or can you send it to me in email? You know, and usually they have to be secured if they send an email, especially because in the medical field you're dealing with HIPAA, in the educational field you're dealing with FERPA. So in early steps we deal with both, which is always fun. So they do sometimes have to use some sort of a secured, you know, system to be able to send those things to you. But if they can send it to you electronically and you can store it on a thumb drive, or you can store it, it's much easier to find things by doing a quick search on the computer sometimes than it is to thumb through a bunch of paper. I just bought a new printer last year, and the reason I bought the printer I did was because it had one of those multi-page feeders, you know, at the top, so I could put more than one page in once and not have to like lay each one down on the glass, you know, and it does double-sided and all that stuff. So, and gosh, I had no idea the prices had come down as much as they have. So use technology to help you, even if you don't have the means to personally go out and purchase it. There's definitely, you know, resources and things out there that can help you get those things by just having them send it to you electronically, as well as giving you the hard copies. So, and when we talk about records and we talk about, you know, what to keep, what not to keep, you know, there's so many variances with it, because it does depend on, you know, if your child is an adult or if they're going to be applying for benefits, you know, you're going to need copies of those reports and, you know, the documentation to show that they were eligible for services or diagnosis and stuff like that. So I mentioned about, you know, the organization stuff that I do. There's a stack and stash, you know, where you just kind of make the piles and suddenly it, you know, it piles up. Alphabetically, organization it. And the bottom line, I think, is, you know, what works for one is not going to work for everybody. So I've come to just putting everything chronologically in binders, just buy big binders, you know, with the 3-hole punch, and keeping them, the papers, if you will, the paper backup copies. So because even though everything's electronic, I still can't quite get rid of the papers yet. Eventually we're gonna have one big bonfire, I think, right? But our kids generate a lot of paper, whether it's IEPs or all those things. I will tell you that with the procedural safeguards, you know, every IEP meeting, they'll ask you if you want a copy of your family rights and early steps or the procedural safeguards. tell them no. Tell them to keep their copies, because you can find that online electronically. And if you find it as a PDF online and you download it to your phone, you can keyword search it, you know? So you're not searching through that 20-page document trying to find what your rights are. So I would recommend, you know, doing as many things as you can electronically. There have been a lot of different systems and apps that do have popped up, but there's a lot of them that do cost money. You know, there's some that free, and then after a certain amount of space, then they're not. So if you have an iPhone, the Notes app on an iPhone, you know, you can actually scan documents and save them on there. So you just open up the app and you hit new and you hit the little camera and it comes up and says, what do you want to scan? You can scan multiple pages. So even if you can't get the things to you sent electronically, you could do that and just take a picture of each page of that IEP, so then you're not carrying all this paper around all the time. You've got it right there on your phone. So that's something that's definitely recommended. One of the other apps I've used is called Evernote. I've yet to have to actually pay for it. You know, I keep some chronological order things in there and attachments and stuff like that, but there's a lot of different things out there, and really just finding, you know, what works for you. Someone was asking earlier about information to keep. You know, it's individual to each person. You know, my son's pretty involved, so I have, you know, one of those little expandable files, and I keep the last report from each specialty in each tab. You know, I think it's like a 9 or 13 expandable pockets, but you know, you might only need 5, or you might need 20. So you really got to find what works best for you. The American Academy of Pediatrics actually has an emergency form for special needs. It's something you can fill out electronically. And again, that's something, if you go into the app or you email me, if you email me, I'll send you all of the handouts and the slides. So you don't have to worry about telling me which ones you want. I'll send them all to you. But I've found that to be useful because it's kind of a summary to fill out of my son. You know, it says his medications, it says his past surgeries, it's got places for dates, you know, all the specialists, and it's kind of one form that's two-sided that, I mean, I can fold up and keep in my purse, right? So what works for you? And what works for you is not going to work for everybody else, right? So just remember that we're each a little bit different. You know, if you're sitting out there going, oh my gosh, she seems so organized. Nope, I'm organized in some things. Not every part of my world is organized. Okay, I might have reorganized John's closet once with colors, so I put all his shirts together and all the colors together. And when I do laundry, they go back in the right color, right? When he does it, not so much. But you know, what works for one person is not going to work for somebody else, and there's some facets of my life where I'm very organized, and then there's others where, you know, I could use a little help, right? So talk to others and talk to other parents and figure out what's going to work for you and take pieces of that. You know, just because I've said something works for me doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for you. And then one last closing thought is, if it was not written down, it was not said. If it was not written down, it did not happen. I don't know if you've ever heard of Pete Wright, the Wright's Law books. I'm sure you have if you're in this room, if you have an older child. But, you know, definitely keeping that paper trail, keeping those notes, keeping those electronic files, all those things. Just stay organized, be inspired to stay organized. I hope you will, and
to infinity and beyond.
And go to infinity and beyond. So thank you for joining me. I do have another presentation in the main ballroom, the plaza room, that is centered around using recycled items and day-to-day items for not only infants and toddlers development, but beyond. I'm going to share a lot of good resources and things. And the last picture I have to show you my son's cute little butt. He hates this picture. He hates this picture. But I'm going to show this to. Oh yeah, he's been in, yes. I like to embarrass him every time. I told him he's got to tune in on the live stream on Facebook at 2:30 so I can show his butt on, on the internet. So, but thank you everybody for coming. Please do, send me a quick email if you would like a copy of the slides, and they are recording the presentation, so they will be all eventually available on the Family Cafe website. So network, talk to other parents. Thank you for coming, and have a great day. Thank you, everyone.